We are back again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and we're here for the final Fight Island event, for now anyway. We've got a phenomenal main event between Whittaker and Till, along with 15, yes you heard that right, 15 fights on this card. Just before we get into the fights though, a quick update on our official results at MMAPlay365 over the 3 Fight Island events so far. We took very small losses on the last 2 events, but anybody who took our Fight Island offer at $10 will have made that $10 back and profited, as our first event in Fight Island was a clean sweep. And just a reminder, this is the final event for you to get a full month of betting advice at MMAPlay365 for just $10. After Saturday, the offers will be taken off. You can also get our daily fantasy sports monthly subscription and all the strategies and information you'll need for both DraftKings and FanDuel for just $10 for your first month too. At $10, you are paying just $2.50 per event. After your first month, the price will be $29.99 per month, but there are no cancellation fees with MMAPlay365, so you can cancel at any time for free if you wish to do so. Go and visit MMAPlay365.com for more information or to sign up today. And let's go. Let's break down some fights. In the main event, we've got Robert Whittaker versus Darren Till, a phenomenal fight at middleweight, surely with title implications. Robert Whittaker, currently the slight minus 115 favourite. The comeback on Darren Till, the slight minus 105 underdog. As for where the value is in this fight, as I always say when the lines are this close with good fights, there can be value on either fighter if you've got a good read, because both sides are playable at the current line. As I've mentioned, if you've got that good read. As for where the line goes, I don't think it's going to move too much. If I'm going to be honest, I'm surprised Whittaker has come down this low, but obviously the respect's there on Darren Till, and I think for a lot of people, there are question marks in regards to Whittaker and that chin durability. So I can see it being one of those fights where if there is money coming in on Whittaker and it pulls Darren Till back into the plus money underdog, I think people will hit that plus money and therefore bring Whittaker's line back down. It wouldn't surprise me if it closed a pick'em either. It is a pick'em in some places, in some books. So I think the line is relatively fair, and I also think it's probably going to close roughly where we're at right about now. As for how this fight goes, it's a really interesting fight. When I dived into the tape, I was leaning towards Darren Till. Like I said earlier in the introduction, I had those potential question marks on Whittaker and that chin and the durability, just purely because he was technically knocked out twice against Adesanya. I think if there was another 5 seconds left in that first round, the fight would have been over. But it wasn't. It was on the buzzer. They came back out and Adesanya finished him shortly afterwards. And obviously being locked in a cage with Yoel Romero for 50 minutes, I don't think there's many fighters that will come out of a cage with Romero after 50 minutes feeling okay. So it is stuff to take into consideration. But actually, when I started watching tape on this, my pick flipped over to Whittaker, and I'll explain why. I feel that knockout in the Adesanya fight wasn't sort of a career-threatening knockout. I don't think there's going to be any lasting damage from it. Adesanya just caught him in the first round. He caught him with a nice punch, dropped him. And then obviously that led to the knockout in the second round because it was on the buzzer when that happened. So I don't think there's any lasting damage from that. Adesanya just caught him. It wasn't a career-changing knockout. And the other thing as well going into that fight, I think Whittaker felt a lot of pressure of being the champion, pressure of fighting in front of your home fans, and I just don't think he relished that pressure at all. Some champions do, some champions don't. Every fighter's different. It doesn't make him a bad fighter, but I just feel that he wasn't comfortable inside the cage. And I'm also not trying to say that he'd beat Adesanya in a different circumstance either. It was just a horrific stylistic matchup for Robert Whittaker in that fight, in my opinion. But when it comes to this fight, I think that Whittaker has got quite a lot of advantages. I think he's not necessarily the better striker, but he's got more weapons in his arsenal. So what I mean by that is Darren Till, it tends to be mostly around the straight punches from the southpaw stance, the obviously right jab, the left straight down the barrel, whereas Whittaker's got a nice jab himself. He's got a nice lead left hook. He's got a nice straight right, a nice right hook. He's also got kicks as well. That right head kick is absolutely brutal. It's hurt multiple opponents in the past. And with all this variety of striking, he puts together nice combinations as well. And they're never the same combinations. He always throws something different, really makes him hard to read. And I'm not saying Darren Till doesn't put combinations together. I'm not saying he doesn't kick either, because he definitely does. He's got nice kicks to the front of the leg. He's got nice kicks to the midsection of his opponents. But I just don't think he puts it all together in combinations as fluidly as what Whittaker does. And Whittaker's movement's really good as well. Till stays quite static. He's got that Muay Thai style of movement where it's more stalking, waits for hard counters, applies pressure slowly. But Whittaker's different. Whittaker will strike nicely from the outside, just keep himself busy with volume. And when it's Whittaker's time to come in, he'll either come in bursting forward, explosive, like I said previously, he'll lead with that left hook, or he'll come in more methodically, more technically, and make his way in slowly. So he can really mix that offensive movement as well. I just think that when you're looking at this fight, if Till doesn't land a hard, straight left that puts Whittaker down, which is absolutely a possibility, by the way, especially if Whittaker does have durability issues, Till could for sure put him down. But when it comes to breaking down a fight and picking a winner, I just trust the fighter that has more weapons in his arsenal, that has a vaster variety of strikes, the fighter that'll land more volume, because that's the thing with Darren Till. As good as a fighter as he is, the volume, the numbers just aren't anywhere close to what Robert Whittaker puts up. And what I always like to do when I'm picking against a fighter is that fighter that I'm picking against, I always like to look at their path to victory and where I can see them winning. And honestly, I can see Darren Till countering Whittaker and putting him down with a straight left hand. But outside of that, if Whittaker doesn't finish Till, which again is a possibility also, if it goes 5 rounds, the judges are going to be looking for the fighter that's landed more shots, the fighter that has been more aggressive, the fighter that's moved better. And I think Whittaker checks all those boxes. I think he's going to land more volume, and I think over 5 rounds he would just look the better fighter. So overall, and I know some people might not agree with this, but I do think Till is KO or bust in this fight. It's just with Darren Till, that knockout percentage outcome is relatively high. But with that said, as I've mentioned, for the reasons I've already mentioned, I'm going to be picking Robert Whittaker to win this fight. And in the next fight, 2 Brazilian veterans that we've admired and loved for years and years. We've got Mauricio Shogun versus Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, also known as Little Nog. We've got Shogun, currently the -190 favourite, the comeback on Nogueira at +165. In regards to where the value is with this betting line, I do think there's minimal value on Shogun. I think at this point, even though both fighters must not be far off from retirement at all, they've given us some great years in mixed martial arts, Shogun is just the better fighter and has more left in regards to offense and durability, which I think are 2 key things in this fight. So for that reason, that's why I think there is still some value in Shogun's line. If it gets too much wider, which I actually think it might, then that value on Shogun will be gone. And like I say, I do see more money coming on Shogun, because I feel that a lot of people are going to think that Nogueira is totally shot and that Shogun should be able to run through him. And I don't think I would agree with that, but on the same page, I don't think it's too far off. And as for how this fight plays out, as I mentioned in the introduction to the fight, I do think that durability is going to be a key factor in this fight and who's just got more left in the tank. And I think that's going to be Shogun. It's predominantly going to be a striker versus striker fight. It wouldn't shock me if Shogun did level change and take Nogueira down to the mat. Remember, this isn't Big Nog, this is Little Nog. And although he isn't terrible on the mat, he is predominantly a boxer. So Little Nog will be looking to keep this fight standing. But I just think Shogun's better there too. I think he's going to be quicker. I think he's going to hit harder. And inside the pocket, I just think Shogun will rip to the body, he'll rip to the head, and he's got to be careful when doing that, because if Little Nog does land on Shogun, I don't think Shogun's durability is 100% there to the point that Little Nog won't be able to knock him out. I think that's a possibility. But when they're exchanging and when they're striking, I just think Shogun has got way more tools. Like I've just said in the Whittaker fight, I think he's got a lot more tools in regards to his striking. I think he could chop at the legs of Nogueira. I think he could, like I say, get inside, rip to the body, rip to the head. I think he's just going to be first to the punch in the majority of the exchanges. And eventually, I feel that that's going to wear on Nogueira. And I think Shogun could possibly put him away. If not, I think he'll win a decision. He'll take at least 2 out of the 3 rounds. So I'm going to be picking Mauricio Shogun to win this fight. And in the next fight, I think you can call this a veteran fight as well, but it's a veteran fight with a little bit of a twist. We've got Fabricio Werdum fighting against Alexander Gustafsson. And if you are looking on Wikipedia or Tapology trying to figure this one out real quick, it's Alexander Gustafsson that's stepping up to heavyweight to take on Fabricio Werdum. And we've got Gustafsson sitting as the -340 favourite. The comeback on Werdum at +280 as the underdog. A very wide line in my opinion. I don't think it should be this wide at all. I definitely understand why Gustafsson is favoured in this fight for sure. And I just don't see any value in this betting line at all because I think Werdum looked really bad last time out. I think stylistically, even though it's Gustafsson moving up to heavyweight, Werdum is going to have problems in this fight. So I don't even think that there's much value at +280 on Werdum. It's one of those fights, there's at least one every week where the line is really wide, but the favourite is likely going to win the fight. So that's the case here. And unless Gustafsson's line comes down, I don't think he's really playable even in a parlay. But as for where the line moves, I don't really see it moving too much, if I'm honest. I can't imagine anybody rushing to the betting window to take Gustafsson at -340. And on the flip side, I can't see many people rushing to the betting window to take Werdum at +280. Because even though it's a nice, juicy line, I just think it's a bad fight for Werdum. And moving straight in to how this fight plays out, the reason I favour Gustafsson in this fight is purely because of speed. So even though I think he's going to be giving up a lot of weight to Werdum, so he's got to be careful if he does engage inside the clinch because Werdum should, in theory, be the stronger fighter inside the cage. It's this speed and the volume of Gustafsson that I think is just going to be a nightmare for Werdum. In regards to height, Gustafsson's actually 6'5", so he's an inch taller than Werdum. The height isn't going to be an issue. But what is going to be an issue is Gustafsson, his style towards Werdum. I think Gustafsson's got the movement, as I've already mentioned a few times, he's got the speed, and I think he's just going to be peppering away at Werdum. Get inside of range, land a couple of jabs, land some straight punches. I don't think he'll do anything daft. I don't think he'll end up tying up with Werdum and putting himself in danger, at least for long periods anyway. I don't think he'll allow Werdum to get close enough to take him down to the mat, which is where Verdum's best path to victory is. I just think Gustafsson is going to be very annoying, very frustrating for Werdum and just peppering away at him. I actually wouldn't be surprised to see Gustafsson finish Werdum late in the fight, potentially the 3rd round. It's going to be tiring for Werdum, and I do think he's going to gas. He won't gas in the first, I don't think, but the more annoying Gustafsson becomes, the more frustrating Gustafsson becomes for Werdum, the more Werdum's going to be chasing the fight. The more he chases the fight, the more energy he's going to expend. I don't think his cardio's that great at this moment right now anyway. So I could see Werdum tiring really badly and Gustafsson just recognising that and pouring it on late in the fight. But if he doesn't finish Werdum, then I just don't see Werdum taking 2 out of the 3 rounds. And like I say, unless Werdum takes Gustafsson down, I don't think he's got a massive opportunity to win this fight. It's a good stylistic fight for Gustafsson. I'm picking Alexander Gustafsson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a good stylistic clash here. We've got Carla Esparza versus Marina Rodriguez. Rodriguez currently the -165 favourite. The comeback on Esparza at +145. Now, as for the line and the value, I actually think the betting line's pretty fair right now. But I do think the value is very sparse on Rodriguez. So I would say the value right now is potentially on the dog in Carla Esparza. But if the lines do close up a little bit, so if Marina Rodriguez starts coming down to maybe -150, -145, then I think the value will switch and the value will be on Rodriguez at that point. So yeah, I understand where the line is. I do think it's fair. I just don't see much value right now. But plenty of time for the lines to move before fight night on Saturday. And as for where the line does move, I do think that we see some Esparza love closer to fight night. I think at +145, it will entice some cappers to lay the money down on Esparza. Name value, she's got perfectly good stylistic advantages in this fight. She's got solid paths to victory. So I do think Esparza will get some money on her name closer to Saturday night. And as for how the fight plays out, again, like I've already mentioned, it's a good stylistic fight. We've got Esparza, who is the wrestler and grappler, against Rodriguez, who is the dangerous striker, but has been taken down in previous fights. She has given up long periods of time on her back, not being able to do much, not being able to stand back up to her feet, and ultimately losing seconds, losing minutes, and losing rounds. You look at Rodriguez's last fight against Cynthia Calvillo. Rodriguez absolutely smashed her on the feet for the first 2 rounds. Calvillo came out in that 3rd round, took her down, got on top of her, got into mount, started going to work, and took a 10-8 round in that final round. So a very interesting fight. And to me, it all boils down to whether Esparza can not only get Rodriguez down, but can get on top and stay on top. And where I think Esparza can absolutely do this, I'm just not totally convinced she can be dominant enough for 2 out of the 3 rounds. I think she can absolutely do it for a round, and I think Rodriguez is going to have a very good round as well. I think she's going to have a round where she's piecing Esparza up, staying on the outside, not letting her in, not letting her close to her hips, and really looking good on the feet. It could be one of those fights where it's 1-1 going into the 3rd, and who wants it more? I just think that Rodriguez's striking and her ability to maintain range and stay on the outside is slightly more advantageous for her in this fight than what it is for Esparza to get in close and take her down. Like I say, I definitely think Esparza is going to take a round from Rodriguez. I think she is going to have spells in this fight where she's looking great and performing well, sticking to the game plan. But over the course of 15 minutes, I just think Rodriguez is going to have an edge over Esparza. I think the longer the fight goes on, the more Rodriguez touches Esparza up, peppers away at her from range, the more tired Esparza's going to get. And that final 3rd round, I feel, is going to belong to Rodriguez. And if I'm right, that means Rodriguez needs one of the first 2 rounds, which I think she can absolutely get. I just think she can win at least 2 of those 3 rounds. And she's definitely more of a threat from a finishing perspective as well. So with that said, I'm going to pick Marina Rodriguez to win this fight. And in the next fight, I absolutely love this fight. It's going to be a ton of fun. We've got Paul Craig versus Gadzhimurad Antigulov. Paul Craig currently the -115 favourite. The comeback on Antigulov, the slight -105 underdog. As for where the value is with this fight, I'm going to say the same thing as I said with the main event with Whittaker and Till. If you've got a good read on this fight, then it's definitely playable from either side. And as for where this line moves, it's been a bit crazy actually, because Paul Craig came in as the plus money underdog, then some money came on him, then some more money came in on Antigulov, then they entered a pick'em yesterday. Now Paul Craig is the slight favourite, so listen, my guess is as good as yours for where this line moves. It seems to be absolutely all over the place. And as for how this fight plays out, I think I'm about to surprise a lot of people. Obviously, with my love of the Russian fighters, especially the Dagestani-born Russians. Antigulov is from Dagestan. So if you're standing up, please just sit down for a second. I'm picking Paul Craig to beat Antigulov. I'm just going to give you a moment for that to just sink in just a little. And we're back. So I think this is a good fight for Paul Craig. I think each way you look at it from a stylistic perspective, there's advantages everywhere. Antigulov comes out fast, he comes out hard, he'll look for takedowns if he can't knock you out. Now the knockout for Antigulov early on is, in my opinion, his best path to victory. But Craig's a really tall guy, he's not the best defensively, he does have his chin up in the air, so the knockout's a possibility. But I just don't think the percentage outcome of that happening, especially early on, is relatively high. I think Antigulov just swings a little bit too recklessly. And whilst he's doing that, he's also going to be leaving his chin to be hit as well. So he's liable for a KO while he's rushing forward. But the other thing Antigulov could do is get in on the hips of Craig and take him down. But Craig will happily take that. Craig loves working off his back. He's got great triangles. He's got great arm bars. He loves throwing up his legs in guard. So whilst they're on the mat and they're dry, no sweat, no slipping, I think Antigulov could be liable for a submission there as well. As I've already mentioned, Paul Craig's really tall, so them legs will come up really quickly. It'll not be too hard for him, even though he has got good dexterity in his legs anyway. So in those early moments, yes, Antigulov could knock Craig out for sure, but on the flip side, Craig could knock Antigulov out whilst Antigulov's trying to knock Craig out, and if Antigulov tries to take him down, then he's not safe on the mat either. But what I like about Paul Craig in this fight is he's got 3-round cardio. So if this gets out of the first round, I don't trust Antigulov to be very fresh. If he does manage to be fresh into the second round and it goes into a third round, then I think the chances of Antigulov being fresh in round 3 is significantly less than him being fresh in round 2. But Paul Craig can go those 3 rounds, so in my opinion, if this fight goes late, Antigulov's got to be very careful, because although Craig isn't known as a power puncher, he's still got knockout power, even if it's just in his knees, landing a knee inside the clinch. As I've already mentioned 3 times now, Craig's the taller fighter. So this is what I meant by Craig's got a lot of advantages in this fight. As I've mentioned, he could very easily get KO'd early in round 1 as Antigulov's coming forward, but outside of that, I just think Paul Craig's going to be a problem for Antigulov everywhere, and the longer the fight goes on, the more I favour Craig. So I'm going to be picking Paul Craig once again to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Alex Cowboy Oliveira versus Peter Sobotta. Oliveira currently the -170 favourite. The comeback on Sobotta, the +150 underdog. I think the value is with the underdog in this fight. And it's really weird because I totally understand why Cowboy is the favourite in this fight. And I kind of understand why he's a -170 favourite as well. He's a really likeable fighter. He's athletic. He's explosive. He has fun in there. But when you actually break this fight down, it is honestly too wide for reasons that I'll mention very shortly. As for where the line moves, again, it's been going back and forth. Cowboy was a bigger favourite a couple of days ago. More money came in on Sobotta. Now more money's coming back in on Cowboy, so it is fluctuating a little bit. But by the time it comes to fight night and the betting lines close, I don't think it's going to be too far off from where we're sitting at right now. But as for how this fight plays out, I just simply don't trust Cowboy. I think that although I really like him as a fighter, I think he's entertaining and I love to watch him, he just does stupid stuff inside the cage, especially on the mat. He works so hard to get his fighters down to the mat, and his offensive wrestling's actually pretty good. But when he's on the mat, he works hard to get in good positions, so this is great, but he makes shocking mistakes positionally. He gives away great positions, puts himself in bad positions because of it. In tennis, they call it the unforced error, and that describes Cowboy so much when it comes to his ground game. The problem is with this fight is Sobotta's no slouch on the mat. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Dean Lister, so that's a legit black belt. It shows when you watch him as well. He's heavy on top, positionally really good. He's got an obvious submission threat. And unlike Cowboy, he doesn't make many mistakes on the mat, if any at all. So this is where I think Sobotta has got a huge advantage. Even if he's taken down, he'd just have to be patient, wait for an opening, wait for a mistake, or even attack off his back, look for a sweep or reversal. Where it does get sketchy for Sobotta though is on the feet. Even though I actually don't think he's got bad hands, but I do think Cowboy is more athletic. I think he's slightly quicker. I think he's slightly more dangerous. And if this fight is won and lost on the feet, then you'd have to favour Cowboy to win this fight. But that's the thing. Cowboy likes to fight on the mat too. So even if he's doing really well on the feet, I do think he'll shoot in on Sobotta and try and take him down. And I think he's going to be really surprised with how good Sobotta is on the mat. And overall, I do think this is going to be a true showcase of mixed martial arts. I think we're going to see a little bit of everything. I think we're going to see takedowns from both sides. I think we're going to see moment striking. And if the fight is close, which I think it might be, when the judges look at what they can give an edge to over those 3 rounds, should it go 3 rounds, I think the top position time of Sobotta, the more dominant positions, the control on the mat, might be just enough to give him that edge that he needs. So I'm going to be picking Peter Sobotta to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a debutant, another Cage Warriors champion. We've got Francisco Trinaldo fighting Jai Herbert. Francisco Trinaldo currently the -170 favourite. The comeback on Jai Herbert at +150. In regards to where the value is in this fight, I do think there's value on Jai Herbert at +150. I don't think that Trinaldo is washed up or done or ready to retire. I don't even think the dude's declining. He's just a finished product at this point. But he's a very good finished product. It's not that. It's just stylistically and the speed and the movement of Herbert. I just think his youthful energy and, like I've just mentioned, that speed and movement could be enough for him to beat Trinaldo in this fight. So at +150, I definitely think there's value on his betting line. As for where the line moves, I actually see more money coming in on Trinaldo, and I don't hate that, and I expect it. Trinaldo's the veteran in this fight. He's the guy that has been around for years, fought the best of the best, being a perennial top fighter in the UFC. It's tough to back against that sort of guy. So I do think the money's going to be coming in on Trinaldo, and that value I think will just be greater on Herbert. As for how this fight plays out, I've touched upon it already. I think Herbert's striking, his Muay Thai, his kickboxing, I think it's really crisp, it's tight, he doesn't make too many mistakes on the feet, and volume and speed along with movement in this fight is key for Herbert. If Herbert can get inside, avoid the big power hand from Trinaldo, avoid getting kicked to the body too much, I think that Jai could land some shots on Trinaldo, and even if it's just a case of moving into range, landing a quick jab and moving out initially, and then as the fight progresses, just increasing a shot onto that combination. So later on in the fight, it's landing a quick 1-2 and then getting out of range. Just almost dancing around Trinaldo, because Trinaldo, as good as he is, his movement isn't very fluid. He doesn't move rapidly laterally. He doesn't move rapidly in and out of range. It's that traditional Muay Thai style. I've spoken about it already on this podcast. It's more stalking, waiting for his opponents to come in and then snapping that hard counter on him. It's just Jai's really quick, so he might be able to get out of that range before Trinaldo's even managed to land anything on him. It's going to be a difficult fight for Jai. I think it's going to be a rude awakening in the UFC, because this is not going to be easy for him, and it's a million miles greater than any competition that he's fought in Cage Warriors. Trinaldo is a serious dude. Even though Trinaldo's the veteran, the more experienced fighter, and the fighter that's been there and done it all, I just feel that the physical advantages of Herbert could be enough to get him the win in this fight. But make no mistakes, Jai Herbert has got to fight a really good fight here. Otherwise, Trinaldo is going to run right through him. But with that said, I am going to put faith on the debutant. I am going to pick the ex-Cage Warriors lightweight champion Jai Herbert to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Nicolas Dalby versus Jesse Ronson. Dalby currently the -255 favourite. The comeback on Ronson at +215. I completely understand where this betting line is. I think it's fair, it's justified. Nicolas Dalby has looked great so far. He's looked great since he was cut from the UFC the first time. Improved a ton in Cage Warriors and he's come back looking in fine form too. So in my opinion, I do think there's value on Dalby. Potentially playing him straight could be a good parlay piece as well, but I do think that the line's justified for sure. As for where the line moves, honestly, I could make a case for money coming in on either side. Obviously, you've got Dalby. I think if people see this fight as I see it, then they might think there's value still to be had at -255. Put money on Dalby, and then obviously that line will head more towards -300. But on the flip side with Ronson, the dude's got power, he can knock you out. People like that sort of guy. Look at the fight a few weeks ago with Justin James knocking out Frank Camacho. I think that was a big shock to a lot of people. So people do like playing these big dogs with power. I could make an argument for money coming in on Ronson as well. Ultimately, I don't think the line is going to shift too much. And as an educated guess, Dalby could close -275, maybe -280. So we'll see where that line moves. As for how the fight plays out, I think that Dalby's got to really mix it up this fight. He's got to mix his striking with his takedowns. Once he gets takedowns, he's got to spend time on top of Ronson. I don't think it's a completely straightforward fight, but Dalby's got the skills, he's got the ability, the qualities to make sure that he just doesn't lose this fight, and I don't see him losing it. Ronson's not an easy out. You look at his last two losses, both in the PFL, Nikolai Alexakin, Nathan Schultz, both really good fighters, so not bad losses on your record. In regards to Dalby, like I said, if he mixes it up, doesn't spend too much time striking, because that's, in my opinion, the biggest path to victory for Jesse Ronson, by swinging a big bomb, landing it on Dalby and putting him out. Dalby has got to close the distance. He's got to get inside, get in on the hips, look to take Ronson down, put him on his back. Ronson does seem to be better on the mat when he's in a more advantageous position, a more offensive position, off his back. I think that Dalby will have advantages on top of him, and I'm not sure Ronson will be able to get back up to his feet, and if he does, it won't be easy, and Dalby could get him back down anyway, and then it would just become a little bit demoralising for Ronson. I like Dalby in this fight. I think he's a better fighter everywhere, so I'm going to be picking Nicolas Dalby to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jake Collier returning, this time to heavyweight versus Tom Aspinall, another ex-Cage Warriors fighter. Tom Aspinall currently the -225 favourite. The comeback on Collier as the +185 underdog. Now, this fight was supposed to go down at UFC London. That was just before COVID-19 and the lockdown, so unfortunately we didn't get it then, but we are getting it now. As for where the value is in this fight, although minus 225 might seem quite wide for some people, I do actually think the value is with Tom Aspinall here. Aspinall's got a really good skill set, and I just think he's going to be the slightly better fighter wherever this fight goes. So the value for me is with Aspinall at minus 225. If it does start getting up to minus 250, minus 275, then that value will shrink. And at minus 275, I just don't think it'll be there at all. As for where the line moves, I do think we might see it come up to minus 250. I don't think it'll get much wider than that. I'd be surprised if it did, because it just shouldn't be that wide. And more money might come in on Collier purely for the fact it's a wide line. But I do think Aspinall closes around minus 250. So I think a bit more money comes in on the Englishman. As for how this fight plays out, as I've said, Aspinall is the natural heavyweight. Jake Collier is fought at middleweight, then he moved up to light heavyweight, so I'm really interested in what he's going to look like from a physique perspective up at heavyweight. And the main concern, which ties in with the move up to heavyweight as well, is the fact that Collier hasn't fought for almost 3 years since his win against Marcel Fortuna back in 2017. So coming back after 3 years, what's he been doing? What's he been up to? And then he's stepping up another weight class to heavyweight as well. It's very, very concerning. Tom Aspinall has got good hands. He's got power in his hands. He's got heavy leg kicks as well. And if Collier tries to get in on a takedown and tries to take him down, he might get the takedowns, but Tom Aspinall's jiu-jitsu is really good as well. He's just a very well-rounded heavyweight. I actually think if the UFC build Aspinall up properly, and more importantly slowly, that he could be a real contender in the years to come, because he's still very young as well. I think he's only 26, so Aspinall's got a bright future. He's very well-rounded. He's a natural heavyweight. I think he goes out there and looks good on Saturday night. I'm taking Tom Aspinall to win this fight. And in the next fight, low-key, I think this is a really, really fun fight. We've got Movsar Evloev versus Mike Grundy. Evloev currently the minus 185 favourite. The comeback on Grundy at plus 160. In regards to where the value is with this betting line, I think it's now sitting with Evloev, and I say that because Mike Grundy was a much bigger underdog just a couple of days ago. A lot of money's coming on him, and I can't say I disagree with it. The value would have been on Grundy for sure at plus 200, plus 230, but as the line has shortened a little bit, I do think that the value now sits with Evloev. And as for where the line moves, it wouldn't shock me for more money to come in on Grundy. I think that trend continues. I think we might see Grundy at plus 150, plus 140, maybe even plus 130. I do think that people like Grundy. I love him as a fighter, so I can see this line shortening up even more come fight night. Now, as for how this fight plays out, they're both predominantly wrestlers. They both love takedowns. They both love spending time on top of their opponent on the mat. It's a very good stylistic clash. Normally with these stylistic fights where it's grappler versus grappler or wrestler versus wrestler, honestly, 8 or 9 times out of 10, they'll both over-respect each other and it'll end up being a striking war. And I think that's what could happen in this fight as well. I do think we might see a takedown from either side just to test the waters and remind their opponent that they are a wrestler too. So be careful if you want to come at me with this offensive wrestling game plan. But overall, I do think this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet in the striking department. And for that reason, that's why I favour Evloev in this fight. You look back at Evloev's fight against Barzola, and it was very competitive, but Barzola's striking was improving fight after fight before it got to that point. Barzola is also a much more mobile, a much quicker striker and fighter than what Grundy is. Barzola's rapid, and Evloev not only kept up with him, but he was beating him to the punches as well, and he actually took a comfortable decision against Barzola. So if I'm right in what I'm saying and this fight plays out on the feet, then I think Evloev is going to be the slightly quicker fighter. Therefore, he's going to be the fighter that lands more volume. He could potentially hurt Grundy as well. Narimani hurt Grundy before Grundy obviously finished him. And that leads me on to Grundy's segment. Grundy has got underrated striking. He's got power in his hands. He actually slips punches really well. He sees things coming. But I just feel that volume is going to play a big factor in this fight, and that's purely down to the speed that I've mentioned with Evloev. If Grundy can't be first, or if Grundy can't land more on Evloev, and it hits the judges' scorecards, he's going to lose the fight. It's as simple as that. And that actually might make Grundy even shoot for a couple of takedowns. But whether he gets them or not, I'm not too sure. Evloev could even stuff them and re-wrestle and get Grundy down. This is why I think it could be a bit of a stalemate on the mat, on the ground. So I think that Evloev is the more well-rounded fighter. I think he's the slightly quicker fighter. I think he's going to rack up more volume. And if the wrestling doesn't play a huge factor, if Grundy can't control Evloev and take him down and spend time on top, I think it's Evloev's fight. So I'm going to be picking Movsar Evloev to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a short notice fight. We've got Rafael Pessoa versus Tanner Boser. Tanner Boser making a quick turnaround here. Currently the -250 favourite. The comeback on Pessoa at +210. I completely understand where this line's at. Yes, it's a quick turnaround for Boser, but he finished Philippe Lins very, very quickly. Didn't take much damage in that process either. So the -250 line definitely makes sense. I definitely think he's the better fighter in this fight. I think the values with him currently, you possibly could play it straight. Could be a good parlay piece as well. And as for where the line moves, unfortunately, I do think more money comes in on Boser at this line. And I do think he might close closer to -300. He's just been looking really good, and Pessoa has been, without any disrespect, a little underwhelming. And when you analyse this fight and break it down, I do think it's quite simple. Pessoa needs to get on top of Boser. I think if you can get Boser on his back, flatten him on his back, I think Pessoa will be really heavy on top, and I'm not sure Boser would have much success kicking him off or being able to stand back up, just because how heavy Pessoa will be down there. And also Pessoa, that's his game. He's a grappler, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He'll want to submit Boser down on the mat. But that's easier said than done, especially when you consider the speed and movement. And I know I've said this a lot tonight, but speed and movement really does play a huge factor in these fights in the UFC and in mixed martial arts. Boser moves really well for a heavyweight, and he will have that speed advantage moving in and out of the pocket. So it's going to be really hard for Pessoa to get a hold of him and get him down to the mat. I think Boser will chop down at the legs of Pessoa. He will slow him down even more, so that speed advantage will be significantly increased. And I think at that point, Boser will find it even easier to get in and out of range. But when he's in the range, he'll probably be able to spend a couple of seconds longer in there than what he would have done at the start of the fight, just because that leg might play a huge factor in this fight. I think Boser's going to have a lot of success. I think he's going to be able to come in and out of range. There's a chance that he comes into range and knocks Pessoa out. If he doesn't, I think he takes a comfortable decision. I'm picking Tanner Boser to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Betch Correia versus Pani Kianzad. Pani Kianzad currently the -145 favourite. The comeback on Correia at +125 is the underdog. As for where the value is in this fight, I do think the value is with Pani Kianzad right now, although it's not too far off hitting the territory where the value would switch over to Correia. But I do think at -145 there is value on Kianzad. And as for where this line moves, I could see more money coming on Kianzad. It wouldn't shock me to see her up at -160, -165, maybe even higher. But at that point, it might start becoming a little bit disrespectful. Money will start coming back in on Correia. So we might see that line drop down to maybe -150. I think that's roughly where it settles come Saturday night. Now, as for how this fight plays out, I think by the end of this podcast, people might be a little bit sick of me saying speed and movement. But listen, it applies in this fight as well. I think Kianzad has got a huge speed and movement advantage in this fight. I also think that she's got a technical striking advantage as well. Correia sort of comes in, bull rushes a little bit, flailing punches, whereas Kianzad has got nice crisp combinations, long combinations. And at this point, I think that is the kryptonite of Correia. That's the way to beat her. If you can beat her to the punch, if you can land more volume on her, stop that forward pressure coming in from her, that's how you beat her. Ciara Eubanks was doing that really, really well. Also added a takedown in there as well. But the problem with Eubanks is she tired out. And come that second round, once she started slowing down, she had to get into the boxing range of Correia to land. The speed wasn't there anymore, and Correia was countering, nice body shots. This is something Kianzad's got to be really careful of as well. She gets into range with Correia, and Correia starts landing hard punches inside the pocket because Kianzad's spending too long inside of that range, then Correia's going to have a lot of success. But I just feel that at 37 years old, for a fighter that hasn't looked great, if I'm being honest, for quite a few years now, I'm not convinced that Correia can come in there and beat the younger, more youthful fighter with good technique, speed, volume, and can do it over 3 rounds. So I am going to be picking Paniki to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ramazan Emeev versus the newcomer, short notice, Nicolas Stolzer. Emeev is currently the minus 380 favourite. The comeback on Stolzer at plus 315. Again, it's a fair betting line. I think it's a really tough ask to come in on your UFC debut and fight someone like Ramazan Emeev. So the betting line makes sense for sure. And as for where the line moves, it wouldn't shock me for more money to come in on Emeev closer to fight night. That might be the money on parlays and people just assuming that he's going to beat this debutant, which in theory he should. So I do think that money is going to come in on Emeev closer to Saturday night. And for how this fight plays out, Stolzer's actually a really interesting fighter. He's tall, he's rangy, he's a good striker, he'll use his punches, he'll use his kicks, he'll mix it in together really well. I do question the level of competition a little bit, but for sure he's never fought anybody like Emeev. Now, Stolzer could cause issues for Emeev early on in the strike, and in fact I think he might be a bit of a nuisance at first, but once Emeev really starts getting into this fight and he's made the reads on Stolzer, and Stolzer's not having the success that he was having at the start of the fight, the longer the fight goes on, I think Emeev will just grow into it really nicely. He'll start to be able to land strikes himself, but more importantly, Emeev will be able to close the distance, get his arms wrapped around Stolzer in a body lock, and then drag him down to the mat, where Emeev will just thrive, in my opinion. I think he'll be more than happy to be on top on the mat, controlling the fight, spending time down there for long periods, really running that clock down, winning minutes, winning rounds. And I think once Emeev really does get into his game, get into that flow, I think he will just enjoy that time on top. There's a chance that he finishes Stolzer, and if he doesn't finish Stolzer and it goes into the next round, Stolzer will know that Emeev can take him down. That'll make him hesitant striking. That'll become an easier fight for Emeev. And if Emeev doesn't get him out of there, he should comfortably win over 3 rounds. So I'm picking Ramazan Emeev to win this fight. And in the next fight, talk about quick turnarounds. This is a 10-day turnaround. We've got Khamzat Chimaev versus the newcomer Rhys McKee. Khamzat Chimaev, no surprise, the minus 1100 favourite. The comeback on Rhys McKee, the plus 700 underdog. Now, the betting lines, in my opinion, are absolutely fair. I can't argue with it at all. Khamzat Chimaev proved that what his coaches were telling me a year ago was absolutely on point, and then some. He proved what I saw on tape. He's living up to the hype. So at minus 1100, it's absolutely fair. But on the same token, it's hard to justify any value in that betting line in MMA. Obviously, 4-ounce gloves, anything can happen. I'm not saying I do see it happening, but it's just tough to justify that. You definitely can't play it straight, and it's not going to add much, if anything at all, to any parlays. So it's a real tough one. If you're looking for value in this fight, we'll wait and see what the in the distance line is, knockout or submission. But the problem with that is you don't know whether he's going to knock his opponent out or submit him. You know, John Phillips could have easily been knocked out in that fight. The fact that Phillips is as tough as they come led to Chimaev having to submit him. So picking a KO or submission is like flipping a coin. You just got to look at the in the distance line, but it wouldn't shock me if that was minus 600, minus 700, you know, if it was that high. It could be one of them fights where we just sit back and, you know, enjoy it all unfold. As for Rhys McKee, absolutely thrilled that he's got his call up to the UFC. The video was so emotional from Graham Boylan video calling him. So I'm happy McKee is signed to the UFC. It's just a really horrific matchup, and props to him for taking a fight that I can almost guarantee 90% of fighters outside of the top 5 will not be accepting that fight with Chimaev. But anyway, we digress. It wouldn't shock me if we saw this go up to minus 1500 closer to fight night. That's where I think the line's going to move. And as for how the fight plays out, I think we're going to see a carbon copy of the John Phillips fight. I think Chimaev's going to come out there. He's going to throw a couple of strikes, take Rhys McKee down. And from that point, it's, you know, how tough is McKee? Is he going to be able to get McKee out round 1? If not, it'll be round 2. If he survives round 2, then I think he'll get him out round 3. I don't see this hitting the scorecards. The worry that I have for McKee in this fight, as good as he is striking, he doesn't have that one-bomb power Phillips had. It's more an accumulation of strikes. And that's actually going to allow Chimaev, if he wants to test his striking in this fight. He couldn't test his striking against Phillips. Why risk it? If Phillips lands that one shot that he's known for, then he's out. But with McKee could actually test his striking, and if it's getting sketchy or dicey, he'll just take him down and win that way. So the worry I have for McKee is he doesn't have that one bomb power Phillips had, and also if you go back and watch the Terry Brazier fight, Terry Brazier was taking down McKee pretty much at will, and there's a big difference between Chimaev and Brazier. So I think it, like I've already mentioned, it's a horrific stylistic fight for McKee. Credit for him taking it. Looking forward to his UFC career. But for this fight, I'm taking Khamzat Chimaev to win. And finally, we got there. The final fight of the podcast. We've got Nathaniel Wood, a short notice fight versus John Castaneda. Wood currently the minus 425 favourite. The comeback on Castaneda at plus 340. I think, again, the line is fair. It's getting close to that point where you've got to justify that value, though, at minus 425. There probably is some value in parlays. Maybe a 3 or 4 leg parlay might give it that little boost for minus 425 right now. But if this starts hitting minus 550, minus 600, which I think is a very high possibility, then the value just won't be there at minus 600. So right now, a little bit of value on Wood, but as for where the line moves, unfortunately, I think more money comes in on Wood due to those big parlays. As for how this fight plays out, it's going to be a really fun fight. Castaneda seems to be a fighter that can do it pretty much everywhere. He's quick on the feet, he's got good strikes, he's taking his opponents down, he can spend time on top. They're actually really similar fighters, and they're both fun in their own right as well. But I just think Wood is slightly better everywhere, if not a lot better in some areas, especially the striking. Wood is also relatively seasoned inside the UFC as well. He's fought top quality opponents, including his last fight against John Dodson. He's had that octagon time, whereas Castaneda, it's his debut. These are going to be new feelings, new emotions, and by far the biggest step up in competition that Castaneda's had. I just don't see Castaneda being able to pull off an absolute madness in this fight. I don't think he's going to be able to edge Wood out anywhere in this fight. His best chance is probably trying to take Wood down and holding him down and staying on top, but that's much easier said than done. And Wood's also good in scrambles, so if Castaneda tries to take him down, Wood could try and scramble in between that takedown and the fight hitting the mat, and therefore he would end up on top. I just don't see it. I think the line's fair. I think it's justified, and I think Wood goes out there. It's going to be a great fight. I think it's going to be a fun fight for as long as it lasts, but I've got Nathaniel Wood to win this fight. And that's all, guys, for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it, and once again, I'd appreciate all the likes to the video and the subscriptions to the MMAPlay365 channel too. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. This is the final week where you can get your $10 offers on both the handicapper packages and the DFS daily fantasy sports content for DraftKings and FanDuel too. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and as a long-term winning gambler over the last 3.5 years, that'll come good for you. And we also cater for you fun gamblers as well, the ones that like the long shot fun parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK. We have plenty of different packages for you guys to choose from. We've got offers on for you as well, all at really affordable prices. Just hop on to MMAPlay365.com to see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.